layers and layers and layers of information are coming out, not just because objects are being examined in detail, but also because new technologies can be applied to them.
Was the mask created for Tutankhamun or for someone else?
For more than 3,000 years, a golden face has watched silently from the pages of history. It belongs to a young Egyptian king whose life was short, whose reign was brief, and whose name was almost forgotten until one discovery turned him into the most famous pharaoh in the world. Tutankhamun. The image of his golden burial mask has become one of the greatest symbols of ancient Egypt. It appears in museums, documentaries, books, and classrooms around the planet. Millions of people have looked into those calm, mysterious eyes and believed they were seeing the face of a boy king preserved perfectly through time. But what if that face was never meant to belong to him? What if the most famous artifact from ancient Egypt was hiding a secret that remained invisible for thousands of years? For decades, archaeologists believed the story was simple. A young pharaoh died unexpectedly, craftsmen created a magnificent golden mask for his burial, and the treasure remained untouched until Howard Carter discovered it in 1922. But new scientific techniques have changed the way experts look at ancient artifacts. Today, researchers are no longer limited to what they can see with their eyes. Advanced imaging technology can examine the hidden structure of materials, revealing traces left behind by ancient craftsmen, repairs, modifications, and even mistakes. And when scientists examined the legendary mask of Tutankhamun using cutting-edge scanning technology, they discovered details that forced historians to ask a shocking question. Was this really the mask of a teenage pharaoh? Or was there another story hidden beneath the gold? To understand the mystery, we need to return to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever made. The year was 1922. Deep inside Egypt's Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Howard Carter had spent years searching for a royal tomb that many believed might never be found. The valley had already revealed the resting places of some of Egypt's most powerful rulers. But Carter believed one important discovery was still waiting beneath the desert sands. Then, on November 4th, his team uncovered something extraordinary. A hidden staircase. As they cleared away the sand, they discovered a sealed doorway carrying ancient markings. The possibility of finding an untouched royal burial was almost unbelievable. When Carter finally entered the chamber and looked inside, he saw something that had been hidden since the age of the pharaohs. Treasures. Golden statues. Jewelry. Ceremonial objects. Furniture decorated with precious materials. A collection so extraordinary that it changed the world's understanding of ancient Egypt. But the greatest discovery was still waiting. Inside several layers of coffins was the body of a young ruler wearing a golden mask unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The mask was not just valuable. It was a masterpiece. Created from gold and decorated with precious stones, it represented the ideal image of an Egyptian king. The calm expression, the royal headdress, and the symbols of power were designed to transform a mortal ruler into an eternal figure. Ancient Egyptians believed gold was connected to the gods because it did not decay or lose its shine. To them, gold represented something permanent, something that could survive forever. The burial mask was meant to protect the king's identity in the afterlife. But as researchers studied the artifact more closely, they began noticing unusual details. Details that did not fit the traditional story. The first mystery was connected to time. Ancient Egyptian burial rituals were extremely precise. When a pharaoh died, preparations had to happen quickly. The body needed to be preserved, ceremonies needed to be completed, and the burial equipment had to be prepared. Tutankhamun's death created a difficult situation. He was still very young. He had not ruled long enough to prepare the kind of enormous royal burial complex usually created for powerful pharaohs. His death appeared sudden, and when archaeologists examined his tomb, they found signs that the burial had been completed under pressure. The tomb itself was smaller than expected for a king. Some objects appeared to have been created for someone else. Certain items seemed to have been changed or adapted. It looked less like a carefully planned royal burial and more like a desperate attempt to complete everything before time ran out. That raised a fascinating question. Could the famous golden mask have also been created for someone else? The clues were hidden in plain sight. One of the most unusual features was the mask's ears. They were pierced. At first glance, this may seem like a small artistic choice. But in ancient Egyptian culture, details mattered. The way a king was represented was carefully controlled. Every symbol, every piece of clothing, and every feature carried meaning. Some researchers argued that pierced ears were unusual for the burial image of an adult male pharaoh. So why were they there? Then there were the facial features. Some experts noticed that the face seemed different from typical images of male rulers. The shape appeared softer, with characteristics that some believed looked more feminine. The possibility began to emerge that the mask may have had an earlier owner, someone who was not King Tutankhamun. And one person immediately became the center of the mystery: Queen Nefertiti. Nefertiti remains one of the most fascinating figures from ancient history. Her famous portrait has become one of the most recognizable images from Egypt, but her final years remain surrounded by unanswered questions. She was the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, a ruler who dramatically changed Egyptian religion and traditions. During their reign, Egypt experienced a period unlike anything before it. But after Akhenaten's death, much of his legacy was erased. Names were removed. Images were destroyed. Memories faded. And somewhere in this confusing period of Egyptian history, Nefertiti disappeared. No confirmed tomb. No identified mummy. No clear explanation of what happened to her. This mystery created one of archaeology's biggest unanswered questions. Where did Egypt's famous queen go? And could the golden mask of Tutankhamun somehow be connected to her? The theory was simple. If Nefertiti had prepared a royal burial before her disappearance, she would have needed a magnificent mask. If Tutankhamun died unexpectedly without enough time to prepare his own, his successors may have reused existing royal treasures. The idea was controversial, but proving it seemed impossible. No scientist could examine the mask deeply enough without risking damage. The golden surface was too precious. The artifact had survived thousands of years. Nobody wanted to be responsible for destroying it in the search for answers. Then an unexpected accident changed everything. In 2014, during cleaning work at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the mask suffered damage. The famous beard attached to the mask broke away. The incident shocked Egypt and the entire archaeological community. A treasure that had survived wars, climate changes, and thousands of years suddenly faced damage caused during modern conservation. But the accident also created an opportunity. For the first time, experts had a reason to perform a deeper examination. They wanted answers. Was the mask truly created for Tutankhamun? Or was history hiding something beneath the golden surface? And as technology improved, scientists developed new ways to investigate ancient objects without harming them. They could study materials at a level previous generations could never imagine. They could search for invisible evidence. Evidence that could reveal whether the mask had been changed, repaired, or transformed over time. And this is where the mystery became even more fascinating. Because the gold itself may have remembered what happened. The search for answers surrounding Tutankhamun's mask entered a new era when scientists began using technologies that could reveal information hidden beneath the surface. For centuries, archaeologists had relied mainly on what they could observe with their own eyes. They studied the shape of objects, the materials used, and the artistic style. They compared artifacts with historical records and tried to reconstruct the decisions of ancient craftsmen. But ancient objects often contain secrets that cannot be seen from the outside. A piece of metal can look completely unchanged while carrying evidence of everything that happened to it. Heating, reshaping, repairs, and alterations can leave microscopic signatures inside the material itself. The challenge was finding a way to read those signatures without harming the artifact. And that was exactly what new imaging technologies promised to do. Instead of cutting into the mask, researchers could examine it layer by layer, almost like looking through time itself. The goal was not to prove a theory. The goal was to discover the truth. Was the famous golden mask created specifically for Tutankhamun? Or had it been transformed from something older? Scientists began analyzing every detail. The results revealed that the mask was more complex than anyone had imagined. The gold was not simply a single piece of history. It was a record of decisions made by ancient craftsmen. Every mark, every change, and every alteration told a story. One of the biggest questions surrounded the name written on the mask. In ancient Egypt, a royal name was not just an identifier. It represented power, legitimacy, and connection to the gods. Changing the name of a pharaoh was a serious act. When a ruler was removed from history, their names were often erased from monuments and replaced. Researchers wondered whether something similar had happened here. Could the golden mask have carried another royal identity before Tutankhamun? The possibility was extraordinary. Because if another name had once existed beneath Tut's inscription, it would mean the artifact had gone through a dramatic transformation. The mask would not simply be a burial object. It would be evidence of a political struggle hidden beneath layers of gold. The most interesting theories focused on the chaotic period after Akhenaten's reign. Egypt had experienced enormous changes. Traditional religious systems had been challenged. Old power structures had been disrupted. When Akhenaten died, the country entered a period of restoration. The old gods returned. The old traditions returned. And many traces of the previous era were intentionally removed. This was the world inherited by Tutankhamun, a young king placed on the throne during a time of political uncertainty. Some historians believe powerful officials controlled much of the government because Tut was too young to rule independently. If he died unexpectedly, those officials would have faced a serious problem. A pharaoh needed a proper burial. A pharaoh needed royal symbols. A pharaoh needed a complete journey into the afterlife. But what if everything was not ready? What if there was no time to create new treasures? That is where the idea of reuse becomes important. Ancient Egyptians reused materials and objects more often than many people realize. Statues, buildings, and monuments were sometimes changed when political power shifted. A new ruler could transform the legacy of an old one. A name could be removed. A symbol could be replaced. A story could be rewritten. So the possibility that a royal burial object was modified was not impossible. The question was whether Tutankhamun's mask showed evidence of such changes. For years, scientists searched. Traditional scans provided important information, but they could only reveal so much. They could show the structure of the object. They could identify materials. They could detect certain repairs. But they could not always reveal the complete history of how the artifact was created. Then came the next generation of scientific analysis. Advanced imaging methods allowed researchers to examine the smallest details inside the gold. The technology could identify differences invisible to ordinary scanning. Tiny variations in the structure of the metal. Signs of heating. Changes caused by reshaping. Evidence left behind by ancient craftsmanship. And the deeper scientists looked, the more complicated the story became. The mask appeared to contain clues suggesting that parts of it may have been modified during its creation. The discovery did not provide a simple answer. Instead, it created an even bigger mystery. Because if the mask had been changed, why? Who was the original person it was created for? And why was it transformed into the face of Tutankhamun? The most popular theory connected the mask to Nefertiti. But the story was not as simple as many online claims suggested. History rarely works like a mystery novel where one discovery solves everything overnight. Archaeologists must compare evidence. They must examine competing explanations. They must separate what is proven from what is possible. And that is what makes the investigation of Tutankhamun's mask so fascinating. The artifact sits at the intersection of science and history. A scientist can study the physical evidence. An archaeologist can study the cultural meaning. A historian can examine the political events surrounding the object. Only when all these pieces come together can a clearer picture emerge. Whether the mask belonged entirely to Tutankhamun or had an earlier history, one thing is certain. The object tells a story far more complicated than anyone expected. It shows us that ancient Egypt was not a frozen world where everything remained unchanged for thousands of years. It was a place of political battles, changing traditions, powerful personalities, and decisions made under pressure. The golden mask was not just created. It was shaped by history. And perhaps that is the greatest discovery of all. The real mystery is not only who wore the mask. The real mystery is what happened to the people who created it. The craftsmen who shaped the gold. The rulers whose names were written and erased. The priests who prepared kings for eternity. The queens who disappeared from historical records. Every artifact from the ancient world carries a message from people who lived thousands of years ago. Sometimes those messages are clear. Sometimes they are hidden. And sometimes they remain buried until technology finally catches up with history. Tutankhamun's golden mask has survived wars, changing civilizations, and the passage of more than 3,000 years. Yet even today, it continues to challenge what we think we know. Because beneath the shining surface is a reminder that history is never completely finished. New discoveries can change old stories. New technology can reveal forgotten details. And objects that seem familiar can still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. The golden face of Tutankhamun may have been staring at humanity for a century since its discovery. But perhaps we are only now beginning to truly understand what it has been trying to tell us.